When I saw Volkswagen Joe earlier on, it's just a really beautiful film.
Thanks so much.
What a job.
Yeah, I'm delighted. It's fantastic to just show it to people and even have chats about it and discussions, because I suppose it opens it's a good foundation, it's a good starting point for chats with people, even just how it came about, how we shot it, but I suppose even the subject matter. And the more people I talk to, even in different countries, the more I realise what was relevant to that time in that film is still very relevant today in different countries with different groups in society. So it's the universal appeal of the film is something that I've definitely had my eyes open to as it's...
And the presence of the border is never too far away, is it really?
And that was a big thing actually. I suppose it's great when you work with people, so many local people from the area, from in around the border, and we were always very aware of the border, and it was kind of a case of being aware of it but not letting it sort of take over. I think it was one of the playwright's son he called it the ghosts of the border, was what he used to say, which I thought was a funny thing to say. But there is a presence to the border, and there's a mentality about it that we tried to pick up on.
There's a power of music, I'd call it. The power of the music at the beginning of the film is a staggering beginning, because it carries the beginning of the film through. Really good choice in terms of pulling me as a viewer in. You were aware of that yourself when you were doing that, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I worked with a great composer from Cork as well, who's kind of starting out. He's done bits of animation and stuff like that. He's very talented, but he has another job. He works as an accountant. Stephen O'Neill is his name.
Stephen O'Neill.
And he's someone I'd worked with on a TV documentary I did for Setanta about 2 years ago. And obviously that was a very different piece, but we had a lot of fun and a lot of kind of back and forth. And I kind of learned a lot from him, and I suppose he learned a lot from me. So with Volkswagen Joe, he was always kind of the person I was going to go with. Other people were making suggestions, and I was like, no, Steve's the man for me. And it was just about kind of working with him about getting it tonally right and sort of structuring the music around the characters and the pieces and stuff like that. But I think he did a fantastic job with the music. And really, the kind of the three things that we get credit for are the performances, the camera style, and the music.
Very thankful we're willing to make this exception. You're very lucky Mrs. Johnson approached us on your mother's behalf. Look, if she's not here by midday, you'll find it very difficult to find your mother nursing care in the future.
We'll be there.
I can't fix this thing.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
I think a lot of the thing with the music was trying to be subtle with it. Some of the scenes with Stuart and Madge, like they had their own sort of musical motif, and it was very subtle and very slight. And I remember when I got the piece and I played it for the editor, and he was like, it's way too strong, it's too heavy. And I was like, hey, you're thinking of it all wrong. Just bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. And the keys just kind of come through every so often between the silences and just kind of accentuate things.
And that works, yeah. Shot beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic cinematographer, Paddy Jordan. It was my first time working with Paddy, and I think we worked really well together. And it was great, I suppose, from my point of view, in that I'd be quite a visual director, and to have someone that I could collaborate with so closely. And kind of, Paddy he's done a feature film called Stitches. I don't know if you've seen it. It's with Ross Noble, and it was the opposite of Volkswagen Joe. It was very well lit. It was very sort of punchy, and I think chatting to Paddy, I was like, this is my plan. I was like, I don't know how you feel about it, or if you're the right kind of guy for me. And the more I talked, the more he was just, I could hear him on the phone. He was just nodding.
That's good, because there's a worry, isn't there, when you're a director?
It's
the old DOP thing we talked about, and the director. In other words, who's the boss?
Yeah.
And we know who's the boss, but that can be a fractious thing.
Well, exactly. You want to be on the same page, but I think a lot of times those relationships break down if you have a director who isn't very confident with camera, and the DOP tries to cover the areas that he feels the director is weak in, and that can lead to clashes where the director feels he's losing control of the film. But because I had a very strong plan and I'm quite technical, and my brother works in camera, and I would know a lot about camera, that it was kind of an area that I felt I was confident in, and I really straight off the bat, like I when I rang Paddy up, I was like, look, we're looking at a couple of different cameras. We shot on the Sony F55. It's a 4K camera. It's really sharp. It was kind of hot off the press almost. But then to take the edge off the digital side of things, we shot with old K35 vintage lenses from like the 70s and 80s. And I came across them about a couple of years ago. Someone I know had a perfect set. So the plan was always to take the edge off the digital straight away. And I think that worked really well. And then obviously in the grade, I had a fantastic grader as well in John Talbot up in Spittle of Panic Post Productions. And we slowly took, the sharpness and the shininess off it.
Yeah.
And gave it a feel.
It worked, because I remember one particular scene that you used a lot of silhouette, which is natural light in the background, and it kind of reinforced for me the darkness and the sense of foreboding, something's going to happen here.
Absolutely.
So the director's eye led me through onto that. And in the pub, watching the pub scene there, where the man in the pub's face is blurred near the camera, but I can see through the lens of his glasses some of the scene that's going on.
Absolutely.
Nicely done.
And it was one of the things I kind of wasn't afraid of. I think, a lot of times there's a fear that if you can't see everything, then, somehow you're going to lose out on what's happening. And for me, one of the there was a lot of visual motifs, but one of them was kind of what you pegged on, and that was using the idea of silhouettes to get that sense of impending danger. And you see it in that scene with Joe and Fitch, where it looks like we could have shot that where it could have been very commonplace and very sort of a run-of-the-mill conversation, but because by shooting it that way, putting them in silhouette off the bat, and you got this sort of sense of darkness, and again, you saw it again with the IRA man upstairs, people watching, and then even the scene where the inspector is in the pub, and we use the locals to kind of frame him, and again, exactly as you were saying, we he's one of the locals is in silhouette, and you don't need to see his face. You see enough to know that
that's all you need.
He's throwing daggers, and you don't need to see everything. And I think, especially if you've good sound, you can play a lot more.
Do you like working with actors, by the way?
I do. I love working with actors. I think that probably comes across in Volkswagen Joe. I really do, and it's brilliant because we quite a strong ensemble cast of about 5 or 6, and they all work differently. So I was working differently with them all, and I suppose someone like Stuart is very cerebral, I would say. So we would talk a lot beforehand, and he would go in and do homework, and we'd have more chats. And he brought he was kind of ready to go when he arrived. Well, then I suppose John would work a very different way. The inspector, he teaches in the Gaiety, and he's kind of a different style, I think, and it's about actions. And a lot of with him, I'd be prepping him for what his character thought was going to happen in the scene. It was all to do with character with John. And then Matthew kind of probably worked more how I like to work, which is again kind of really heavy character work and character questioning and stuff like that. And then Janet worked another way as well. So it was great. It was brilliant for me. And one of the things that I did during the shoot was I would kind of take the actors aside every so often, and I would say, is there anything I can do that can help you?
There's no need for that now. Come on. Joe knows where his loyalties is, don't you, Joe?
Joe? Mrs. McLean's on the phone. She's looking for a car.
Not today.
Is everything all right?
Just, going back into the office, Madge. I'll be in a minute.
The thing is, if you have great performances, you get away with a lot. But the problem is the camera can work against those performances if you're not watching it. So for me, the plan would be to do a lot of prep with the DOP and have a lot of trust, so that you're not getting distracted by camera. And actually on the last shot, I think I did a better job with the DOP with just kind of, we had our plan and I could leave them off, and then I check back in rather than having to check in a couple of times.
Okay.
So I think it was better with that way.
You've enjoyed a lot of success with it so far. You know, for 30 minutes worth of superb entertainment. Festivals around the world have said thumbs up to this one. It's good, isn't it?
No, it's brilliant. And again, it was. I think I've said it before. At the very start, like the way this film came about was it was a drama society who'd had a play that had done very well in the 90s, and they thought, wouldn't it be nice to make this into a film? Oh. And they had applied for funding, which is called Peace 3 funding, which is for the counties in around the border. So it's a peace and reconciliation fund, and a lot of it's to do workshops with kids and to do cross-border things. And this is the first time they'd made a film, so the funding was there, and they put out this kind of vague sort of call for filmmakers to say they had a play, they had funding, and they were looking to adapt it. And I kind of, I threw my hat in. I saw the word funding, and I was like, well, I'm definitely going to, follow this up. And when I read the play, I said, this thing is fantastic. I said, I jokingly was like, you could nearly win an Oscar with this thing, provided I don't feck it up.
Yeah.
Because the story was so strong and the characters were so strong. And then it was just about surrounding myself and our little creative team. We had like Aidan, who works with me with the company. He was one of the producers and he was the editor. And then Anne O'Malley was my producer, and she pretty much was fantastic, like loaves and fish stuff. As John Keller said, we're in the Q&A, and somebody said, how much did the film cost? And in his brain, he went, 200,000, and I went 30 grand, and he said his jaw just hit the floor. And I mean, that is down to Anna and Aidan. Whatever sort of ambitious things I wanted to do, they found a way to kind of enable me to do them.
Nice team.
Yeah, great team. And then Matthew as well, obviously the writer was fantastic, and we'd been in college, we hadn't done anything together, and I'd gotten on to him about doing a different project, and then this came along, and I was like, how would you feel about adapting something? So we went through 28 or 29 drafts over a kind of 5-month period.
That's great.
Where we worked really hard at getting the story and moulding it into something that was cinematic.
I said 2 minutes into the film, my note, nice script.
Yeah.
And it stayed that way.
Absolutely. It was like, and we kept the playwright involved as well. Brendan was brilliant, Brendan McCann. He's a gentleman and a very talented playwright and a lovely person to work with. And he was very giving and very much aware that he was handing it to us, and he trusted us with it. But he was there with little notes and to help us with the dialogue. And every so often he'd look at me and he'd go, Brian, my beautiful dialogue. Because we had to just cut it. We really had to scalp it in order for it to work as a film.
Absolutely.
I mean, in the play, Joe is kind of not an OCD, but he's quite enthusiastic about Volkswagens, where he could talk forever about them. And there's just swathes of him going on about different parts and the excitement that he has for them. And it was like, this is all great for the play, but for the film, from tonally, it's going to be different. So we had to pull a lot of that out. We left in just a hint, but it's enough for people to get that he loves.
It's not easy for a writer, though, who would have written it in the first place for that. But there you go, it's a different, it's an adaptation.
Exactly, yeah. I think we learned a lot about adapting material.
Well, you've done a great job, and thank you so much for coming in to see us today.
Cheers, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you.